Just an update from what we've talked about before. I think from the last time we presented, there's a few new things out there in the electric vehicle area, and I thought I'd talk about a few of those. And then I think John's going to spend some time talking about a road trip that he did in one of our first pure electric vehicles. So this is the Tesla Model Y completing the S3 XY model lineup, and the 3 was supposed to be called the E, but Ford objected, and so therefore it's the S3 XY. Otherwise it would have spelled sexy, which would have been a fun little thing from our friend Elon Musk. Nice range on this car, 300 miles, top speed of 130 miles an hour, which is important because there's a lot of roads where you can go that fast. Well, not really, I guess. 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds, so pretty fast on that too. The long range version starts at $42,700. Important to point out that there used to be a $7,500 tax credit on new electric vehicles, including the Teslas. Tesla has now run out of tax credits, so there is no tax credit available on the Tesla currently. Another entry that was kind of benchmarked against the Model Y. So when Ford decided to build a more compelling electric car, they have had some electric vehicles in the past. The Ford Focus electric was available, had about an 80-mile range, and was basically just a Ford Focus that they had shoehorned an electric drivetrain into. This is a complete redesign from the ground up. This is Ford's first pure electric car designed from the ground up as an electric car, and like I said, benchmarked to the Model Y. So pretty compelling, similar specs and so forth. Is actually a little cheaper if you factor in the $7,500 tax credit that is available on the Ford Mach-E. And mine is due to be built mid-January, and it is in this color and this trim. So looking forward to getting that, and it has about the same range, 270 miles of range on the one that I have on order. So a pretty similar thing, a lot more compelling. It's a little controversial, the Mustang name. The Mustang fans really don't like the Mustang name being applied to an electric car, but then those who've driven it said it deserves to be called a Mustang. So we'll see how it is when it comes. This is what John is planning to be driving here in the near future. He likes a van, and he's growing out the ponytail that goes with it. I told him that he's got to have the surfboards because, you know, those are just a requisite part of driving a Buzz or a bus.
They'd look really good in Wisconsin too.
Yeah. So similar range, at least 200 miles, probably more. All-wheel drive available in it. They're saying around $50,000. If they can bring it at that price point, I think they'll sell a lot of them. So it will be kind of interesting to see whether they actually get it here or not. These will likely eventually be built in the United States, but probably will start being built in Germany and shipped in. Pickup trucks is a big deal for us because we serve rural America, and so everyone seems to drive a pickup truck. They may have other cars too, but they always have at least a pickup truck. This one will be built in Bloomington, Illinois. It's called the Rivian. It's a new company. They've been working on this for 7 or 8 years now, bringing electric vehicles. It's not just this pickup truck. They're also going to be building vans, delivery vans for Amazon, and a SUV that's similarly styled to this. Has a 400-mile range, does 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So if you're a contractor, you can get to the job a lot faster. Has lots of power, 700 horsepower, 860 pound-feet of torque, which is just phenomenal. It tows 11,000 pounds. It could obviously tow a lot more with those horsepower and torque ratings, but it is a light truck chassis, so it would basically pull the truck apart if you tried to tow any more than 11,000 pounds. Amazon and Ford have both made significant investments into Rivian. So they do have some significant backing, and we fully expect that these will start showing up later in 2021. If you don't like cars or trucks, you can always ride a motorcycle. This is the Harley-Davidson. I still haven't found out whether it goes puckata, 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 if they have a sound that makes it sound like a Harley. Again, the Harley aficionados are like, yeah, really, it's not a Harley if it doesn't have a big V-twin engine in it. But then they ride it and they decide, holy cow, this is a whole lot of motorcycle. So not inexpensive. I think this is about a $30,000 bike, so just as expensive as the other big Harleys. But interesting note, someone got together one of these Top Gear, I think it is, guys that run around in cars and make videos about it, and rode these all the way from the tip of South America up into California. And they followed it with Rivian trucks as their backup vehicles. And if you think about how underdeveloped the charging infrastructure is there, you can imagine what an adventure that was. So kind of one to look for if you're looking for, I think it's called The Long Road Up is the name of the program that they made about a documentary. Also along the motorcycle line, there's a lot of stuff going on with electric bicycles for your around town transportation. This happens to be Ford doing it. Harley is also building electric bicycles. So there's a lot of entrance into that electric bicycle market saying, look, for the around town transportation, maybe it doesn't have to be a car. Now for us in the wintertime, it kind of has to be a car, but for certain places, you can almost do year-round transportation on a bicycle. Then getting into things a little bigger, this is the Daimler Mitsubishi Fuso truck. This is an all-electric truck. It is in production already in Europe, making deliveries there. It will come to the United States eventually. Europe is ahead of us because their standards are more stringent. And so some of the adoption has been happening a little faster there. This is Tesla Semi. We'll see. There is a little sound with this, but I don't think I shared the sound, but suffice it to say that it's absolutely silent anyway. The only noise you hear is the other road noise of the other vehicles. Currently, there isn't much charging infrastructure available, so you can see they were pulling into a Tesla vehicle charger for the cars. And what they do is hook 2 or 3 of those charging stations up to the truck at the same time and are able to do a relatively fast charge on it. So that's how they've been kind of getting by for now. Tesla is definitely a leader in bringing the electric semi to the marketplace, but every other semi-truck manufacturer has an initiative and is fairly far along on it. So we will see Mack trucks and we will see Freightliner trucks and we will see all the different brands that you can think of bringing electric semis. Initially for the short runs where you're doing semi delivery around town and short distance runs between small communities and so forth, but ultimately probably also for long runs along the highways. If you don't like to drive at all, you can ride the electric bus. I think there's at least 2 coming into the La Crosse fleet. They may have been delayed a little bit by the COVID pandemic, but this one in particular just set a record running 1,100 miles on a single charge. Obviously a lot of place to put batteries on a vehicle that big. It's just a matter of the cost of that many batteries. This one was running that at like 35 or 40 miles an hour. And some folks say, well, yeah, sure, you can get a lot of range if you're running that slow. But if you think about how city buses run, that's about the speed they run around town. So it is a realistic estimate of how far you can go with one of these. I think the ones coming to the La Crosse fleet are a little smaller than this. We're not a big city, so we don't usually run buses this large, but it will be interesting when they roll those into the fleet. There's also talk about that smart bus that runs down into Viroqua and so forth, having an electric powered bus doing some of that route as well. And then getting into off-road kind of applications. This is an electric backhoe built by Case here in the United States. Ironically, the first use of this one is to dig in natural gas lines. So here we have an electric tractor digging in natural gas lines, which is kind of funny to me, but definitely something for the future. If you can imagine in a city location where you don't want to have a big diesel tractor idling next to a restaurant that's trying to serve meals and so forth, being electric is a big advantage. Here's another electric excavator. This is one of these small excavators, and something like this can even go and work inside a building, doing excavation and work inside a building without creating any sort of emissions or anything. So again, the advantage of electric not having the emissions is a big deal. And then closer to home for us, our agricultural customers and so forth, this is a robotic feeding system. Actually takes the silage there, picks it up. That overhead crane there picks up the silage, loads up the feeder. The feeder runs down the aisles and delivers the silage to the cattle and also pushes it back in, which is normally done with a skid steer loader. So it saves on labor. uses about 8,000 kilowatt hours a year, but replaces 1,260 gallons of diesel, resulting in 16,000 pounds of CO2 reduction per year. That's kind of the end of my intro section, and then I think we'll let John attempt a screen share. I probably need to stop sharing here, and then we can take any questions that any of you have about what I talked about here, and then we'll roll to John, or maybe we just roll right into John if there's no questions.
Okay, can you see that?
We can.
I can.
Okay. Well, as Jeff was talking about, I did a road trip from La Crosse to Iron River, Wisconsin, in an all-electric Nissan Leaf. Darylyn acquired this Nissan Leaf back in, what was it, about April, May, something like that, just in time for the pandemic to really set in. So our trips have been fairly limited, but the idea was to give it a nice, good road trip at some point. And Bayfield Electric is the furthermost member cooperative in our system. So it seemed like, let's just take it to Bayfield. So it's an all electric, which is new for us. All our other vehicles are hybrids, gas, lean, electric. Most of them with a range about 30, 40, 50 miles. From our perspective, about enough to get out of La Crosse and back without barely making it to any of our member co-ops. So we hadn't gone all electric until we decided to go with this one. It's got a 62 kilowatt lithium ion battery, an estimated range of 226 miles. Gets about 3.6 miles per kilowatt hour. And something else we're looking at with this vehicle is a vehicle to grid potential, which we hopefully will be working on in the next year, using it to see if we can shave some of Darylyn's peak in the summertime. Now let's boldly go on a long trip. What we've been hearing a lot with the electric vehicles is range anxiety. Well, let's see if we can do this. Like I said, Bayfield is the furthest member cooperative from Darylyn Power. The goal of the trip was to test member cooperative charging points. Out of the 24 member cooperative, I believe 20 of them, something like that, have charge points that you can stop and charge an electric vehicle at. And so the trip would require a close coordination with various member cooperatives, because a lot of them are, these charge points are at their buildings, inside secure fences or whatever. So I couldn't exactly arrive at 5 p.m. in the afternoon and expect to charge for 3 hours, because most of them had gone home. And so other thing, it took some planning for emergency charging if needed. I was carrying a portable charger for use at a 240 volt plug if I can find it, or Jeff suggested roll into a campsite somewhere and camp overnight and plug it in. So quite a bit of planning went into this. I didn't just jump into the vehicle and take off for Iron River. It took a few trial runs to get things sure I knew what I was doing. First trial run, we went to Jackson Electric, just drove with the Black River Falls and home. It was within the range of the vehicle, nothing overly exciting in that one. The second trial one, which is what this picture is from, was a rather interesting thing in that this is at the Walmart just off Highway 53 in Eau Claire, where the picture was taken. And just prior to getting there, somebody had taken an electric pole out and the whole electric system for the area was down. So my ability to recharge the vehicle looked like it was going to be extremely limited. And so thought, well, I'll just go to a local restaurant, get something to eat and see what happens. Unfortunately, by the time I got back, the charge point was up and running again. Otherwise, Jeff and I were thinking, well, maybe I could make it to Tomah, Wisconsin, which was been the closest charge point from here that allowed me to get back to La Crosse. As you see from the picture, I had to park at a rather cockeyed angle. The charge point on the vehicle is right in the front. The cord from the charger was so short that if I parked, I could straight in, it wouldn't have reached the front of the vehicle. And if I backed in, I had to get so close to the charger, I couldn't open my car door. So I had to back in at this crazy angle so I could be able to charge the vehicle. In the third trial run, I went to Barron Electric in Barron, Wisconsin. That was so I could think, well, I could make it to Barron Electric and back. I could make it to Barron to Bayfield. So I did these 3 trips with the idea of proving that I would have the capability of just getting to Bayfield. So this was my travel plan. From Dairyland up to Jump River in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, then to Ashland, to Bayfield Electric in Iron River, back to Barron Electric, back to Eau Claire Energy in Fall Creek, just outside of Eau Claire, then back to Dairyland Power. So set off on Monday, October 5th with 100% charge. Everything was good, weather was fine. You get to Eau Claire, had about 54% charge left. And you get there and you find out the building is under construction. They're reworking the building. And so of the 2 charge points, one was inaccessible due to building innovations. And so I had to park in the garage for 90 minutes to charge. It was not a scenic trip, let's put it this way. Then from Eau Claire, the drive from,
Hang on a second.
yes,
Hang on a second.
somebody's saying, hang on a second.
Go ahead, John. I think it was just outside noise.
Oh, okay. This will give you an idea what my screen was. Just the drive from La Crosse to Eau Claire Energy, it would have taken at Eau Claire Energy 5.5 hours of recharge time to get back up to 100%. So a little less than a 2-hour drive would have taken 5.5 hours of charging at the level 2 charger there at Eau Claire Energy. One of the things you learn is you don't go necessarily by the fastest time, you tend to think of the shortest route. So when I left Eau Claire, I was going to go the back roads up to Ladysmith because it was the shortest route. Well, when I got to Cadott, there was a sign that said the bridge is out across the Chippewa River near Cornell, which meant I had to drive 20 miles back to get around the bridge outage. And that required, once I got to Ladysmith, instead of my plan for charging for 2 hours, it meant that I had to charge for 3 hours in their garage again, just to be able to make it to Ashland. So that meant that I abandoned my plans to make it to Iron River on the 5th. I only made it to Ashland. This is another fun thing. Ladysmith, Jump River Electric had 3 level 2 charge points. One was inaccessible because some guy from Illinois decided he needed to repair his boat and pulled off the highway and was parked in front of the charger and had his boat disassembled, all kinds of stuff out in the parking lot. So we couldn't get him to move, so I couldn't charge there. Moved around to another one. It was inoperable due to a part shortage. So again, I ended up in the garage charging for 3 hours. So my trip to start at 7 o'clock, I made it to Ashland that night, sometime around 6 in the evening. In Ashland, for backup, there are 2 charge points that are accessible, both at vehicle dealerships. Both of them close at 5 o'clock. So the next day when I got up to drive to Bayfield Electric, which is 37 miles from Ashland, I had just over 40 miles of range. So when I got there to Bayfield, I had 4% charge left with 10 miles of range. Meant the vehicle would have to charge for at least 12 hours, but it was left for 24 hours. So I can't say that, technically I can't say I did the entire trip on electricity because I had to borrow a vehicle from Bayfield so I could drive back to the hotel overnight. So my electric vehicle had to stay at Bayfield overnight to recharge so I could make it back. This was what I was seeing on my gauge on the vehicle when I rolled into Bayfield Electric's garage. Battery charge is low, charge now. Not exactly something you want to see in the far north woods when you only know of one charger and you're hoping that it's working. So after a day in Bayfield, letting the vehicle charge and just talking to the people at Bayfield about the vehicle, as you notice during the whole trip, we maintain social distancing and pandemic requirements, hand sanitizer, face masks the entire time. So when I left Bayfield with 100% charge, by the time I got to Barron, I was down to 42% charge left with 100 miles of range, which meant I wasn't going to make it home from there. And so after charging for 2 hours at 140 miles of range, and Barron is about 150 miles from La Crosse. So it still didn't have enough to make it back to La Crosse. So I had to make one final stop at Eau Claire Energy Cooperative again. So it was my second stop in the garage at Eau Claire. You can see 35% charge and 85% miles left. Not enough to make it back to La Crosse. Charging the vehicle, got kicked out after 90 minutes because they needed to shut the power off to the building for work they were doing. So by the time I left, I had just about enough to make it back to La Crosse, which I did. So I arrived back at about 5 p.m. on Wednesday after leaving at 7 a.m. on Tuesday, and about 10% charge and 20 miles of range left on the batteries, having driven the vehicle 550 miles. But every mile was on electric power cooperative or electrons. So I at least achieved that part. I didn't have to have Jeff come and rescue me. I didn't have to chase down a generator or park it at Walmart again. So lessons learned, the level 2 chargers add about 20 miles of range per hour of charging. So if you drive at 100 miles, that means in a level 2, you're gonna have to do 5 hours of charging. The range was effectively about 200 miles because once you get to 70 miles per hour, like on Highway 53 or Interstate 94 or one of those the high speed sections, the range drops significantly very quickly. So initial charge of about 250 miles meant charging for some 300 miles. So total charging time about 20 hours during the trip. So for a trip home, not for the entire trip is not doable in one day. Work for Dairyland Power, a trip to Iron River and back in one day is not out of the question. So used about 150 kilowatt hours of energy, total about $21 worth of electricity. And one thing you learn is you don't pass a charging station. You have to be willing to stop and let it charge for a little while to make sure you can get to the next one. Just to compare it to a conventional gas vehicle, like we say, we do it in a one-day trip on a, not a regular basis, but a few times over the years. You know, electric vehicle, gas vehicle, 450 miles, you can go up the Iron River, refill a bloomer. Trip is doable in one day on about 18 gallons. So that kind of gives you a comparison of what the trip is. Doing it in the Nissan Leaf today as compared to a conventional gas vehicle. But we're adding more charging points. Bayfield Electric just announced today that they're adding a level 2 charging point at the American Birkenbeiner in Cable, Wisconsin. So if any of you go for that, we got a charge point. You may have to wait in line for a while. Only one charge point. You may have a few electric vehicles that are ahead of you. But so overall, rather interesting and challenging trip. Any questions or comments on it?
This is Bob Williams. Just one, no, I got a couple questions, I guess.
Have the different cars standardized on plugs and voltages and whatnot? Does the same charger work on a Tesla?
Jeff was more up to date on that one than I am, but as far as they're getting there, but at the moment, there's a variety of chargers that are out there. For example, I could not have stopped at a Tesla charge point and used a Tesla charge point.
Yeah, so just to chime in on that, the Tesla charger is the one that's unique. They do have an adapter so that the conventional chargers that John was stopping at can be adapted to charge a Tesla, but not in the reverse. So in other words, if you have a Tesla fast charging station like the one, well, there's one in Minneapolis, there's one in Rochester, there's one in La Crosse.
One here in La Crosse up by the Walmart.
Yeah, by the Home Depot, actually, yeah.
Home Depot.
Yeah, so those Tesla charging stations are specific to Tesla and will not charge any other cars. In Europe, they have made the change and they have converted to the other standard, but because the European Union required them to do so. So the answer is Tesla could convert over and be like everyone else. When will they do that in the United States? Either when they're mandated to or when it's a competitive advantage for them to switch over. There is a lot more fast charging getting built out. John made the hardest trip possible. He went into what is a fast charging desert. Northern Wisconsin is a fast charging desert right now, and there just isn't really any available. If you look in Minnesota, Minnesota has done a fantastic job of building out. Even just this summer, they've added a number of charging stations, 2 on our lines in particular, one at St. Charles and one at Albert Lee, but there's also one at Rochester and all around. So basically you can navigate around Minnesota and have fast chargers everywhere you go. Those fast chargers charge something like 5 times as fast as the other conventional level 2 chargers. So that 5-hour charge that John was talking about would be less than an hour typically.
Mm-hmm.
So a big difference there as we build out fast charging. And as John mentioned, we are working to build out a number of additional fast chargers to try to sort of fill in that fast charging desert in the northern part. It was mainly a lesson in, well, we need more fast chargers, I think was the lesson that we took away from John's trip.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's plans for one near Trago.
Yes, yep, we're trying to do that, yep.
Which is just within the range of what the Leaf could do from La Crosse up near Spooner, Wisconsin, off Highway 53. It'd be a bit iffy, but it means like you could stop at Barron Electric and charge for an hour, then do stop at Trago and charge for half an hour. Would be like 3 to 4 hours worth of charging at Barron.
And we've tried to, and most of the vendors that have put out fast charging have tried to locate them close to a restaurant. So at least you can stop and have lunch and use the restroom and so on and so forth. By the time you get done with that, typically your charge is done. It does sort of constrict you a little bit because it might not be your favorite restaurant. But as electric vehicle driver myself, I'm kind of used to, well, we stop where there's chargers. We don't worry about whether it's the restaurant we want to eat at or not. We stop where there's chargers. So a little bit adjustment for the near term. Longer term, I think we'll see more and more fast chargers out there, and it'll become less and less of a problem. And the range keeps getting longer and longer on the cars as well. So
battery question, if I can have the floor here for another minute, and I don't want to bogart the whole thing, but about a year ago, IBM was bragging about some new battery that would charge faster and hold more energy, and that's the last I heard of it. It was about in December. Anybody get any updates or read anything about it? An update?
not hearing anyone else chime in. We see battery advancements happening on a regular basis, and I see stuff in the press about them all the time. For now, lithium ion seems to be the dominant technology. There are a number on the horizon that look like they might be better and faster and so forth. Even the lithium ions, when they go to a solid state electrode, may be lighter weight, more capacity, and faster charge rates. there are several companies that are saying they'll be bringing that in the next few years. So yeah, definitely some potential for advancement there. And we'll see what the future brings. But for the next few years, lithium ion will be the dominant technology.
Oh,
So,
hello,
John,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I had a question picking up on that battery. I'm not so sure that we might see battery advancements in the next few years, primarily because they all depend upon special rare earth metals. And if you've been following the market, there's quite a bit of upheaval there. And recently, a couple of countries have started controlling export of things like lithium and other stuff that are used to make those batteries. So we got to be really cautious and not to necessarily raise expectations that it's going to get cheaper and faster. So just a note of caution there.
Yeah, I think that's a well-placed note too. Lithium is incredibly abundant in the Earth's crust. There's large mines in both South America and Australia. The element that tends to be the issue is cobalt. And most of the faster charging car batteries do use cobalt. There has been some advancement with the lithium iron phosphate batteries. In fact, Tesla is starting to use those in China. The lithium iron phosphate batteries do not have any cobalt in them. So there is a movement away from cobalt and towards technologies that don't use cobalt because of that exact reason. Not only the fact that it's a rare earth, but some of the conditions it's mined under are undesirable, to say the least. So definitely some advancement there just within the lithium chemistries. And then beyond lithium, obviously there's a lot of things coming that might be sodium batteries and things where they're incredibly abundant in the Earth's crust. So not such a issue about the scarcity of those elements. Good point.
hey, John, this is Ron. Is the level 2 charger, is that similar to what would be in your garage for a charger? I mean, is that
Yes,
so about the same?
yeah. One of the issues, level 1 is the 120 volt circuit. Level 2 is a 240 volt or 208 volt circuit. In most houses, it'd be the 240 volt circuit. Our problem that we're battling, Ron, is a lot of garages don't have 240 volt circuits in them. Like my garage out here in the countryside doesn't have a 240 volt circuit. It cost me, I think the estimate is right around $3,000 to have a 240 volt circuit put in now into my garage, just so I could have a charge point put in. And one of the things that the co-ops have been working on is to get contractors to just go ahead and put a 240 volt circuit into houses as they're building them. With the idea that, yeah, that if you think in terms of 100, the Nissan Leaf at 120 volts would take about 48 hours to fully charge, you're thinking something like that. Whereas on a 240 volt circuit, it's about 12 hours. So 12 hours is basically overnight. So it's much more doable on a level 2 overnight charging.
So is it like a 20 amp or 30 amp service, kind of like a air conditioner or?
It's an air conditioning circuit, 30 amp.
Okay.
But yeah. But then the problem is then once you get above that, you're talking about circuits that are not readily available in a household. So then we'll start looking at what Jeff was saying, more towards commercial industrial sites where the larger circuits are in. We get a 480 volt charge points and larger, like at the Walmarts and where the
So earlier, John, you had talked too about places like Quick Trip trying to offer charge stations, but political issues were problematic for quick charge.
they problem at the moment is for any business like Quick Trip or anything, is the cost justification. There just aren't that many electric vehicles running on the roads at the moment. And so, like when I pulled into the Walmart Super Center there in Eau Claire, and the chargers weren't working, I called up. They had a 1-800 number to call. And I called it and I said, "Aren't you this place working?" They said, "Well, it worked 7 days ago." So I was the first person in 7 days to actually charge a vehicle at Walmart there in Eau Claire. And you think that when you start talking about the terms of these DC fast chargers, you're talking about infrastructure for a fairly good sized commercial operation, or if you get into the likes of the really fast chargers, you might be talking infrastructure that's almost equivalent to powering a Walmart that's sitting there doing nothing most of the time. And that's very difficult to get your cost back or your money back on that. So like a Quick Trip is like, yeah, we just don't see a future in this at the moment.
So how does that impact your planning for Darlin Power?
So some of this will be built out by utilities, not just Dairyland, but Xcel Energy and other utilities will build out charging infrastructure. We have a vested interest in promoting the electric vehicles because most of the charging will be done at home. Something like 80% of the charging is likely to be done in the home. And that's a load that we can slot into a time that really works well for us. So in other words, they can charge overnight when we have abundant energy available and would like to fill those valleys. So it's a good fit for us. So that's why we will build fast charging infrastructure to enable home charging. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So overall, how green is green?
So for our electric vehicle chargers, we're doing all of it with wind and solar. So we're making the effort to so it's a virtual transaction, right? But we're allocating those renewable energy credits. So technically it's renewable energy that goes there. Now, as the electrons flow, no, it could be coming off of a coal plant. But we're essentially saying we're going to invest in additional wind and solar if we need to power these above and beyond whatever other requirements we have to have renewable energy in our portfolio.
If we shift the peak load from daytime to nighttime when everybody's recharging their Teslas, you're not going to get much solar, so you're going to be relying on wind.
So the nighttime is when we have the most abundant wind, but again, this is a virtual transaction. So we pretend that the grid can store this energy. So if we generate excess solar during the day, that's what we're allocating maybe to go into the car at night, even though physically that's not what's happening. Virtually, we're allocating those resources. So the renewable energy has a renewable energy credit associated with it. And we track those credits and make sure that the energy that's going into those charging stations is renewable energy by just, it's an accounting transaction. No, that gets a little confusing, to say the least.
Jeff, you mentioned the construction equipment, which I had never really even thought about. Is that, do you see that as a growing thing? And how do they charge, if you're out on a construction project? So.
Yeah, so it's definitely coming. Obviously, you need a 240 volt level 2 charger at a minimum to charge those vehicles as well. So you wouldn't really need fast charging because typically you'd have the overnight period. You're not traveling with the device, but you definitely have to have, if you're getting a temporary electrical supply at the construction site, it may have to be a little more robust than it was in the past. Not just to run a power saw or whatever. Interestingly, like on the Rivian truck and a lot of the pickup trucks that have been suggested for the contractors, there's a 240 volt receptacle on those trucks to run your power saws and so forth. So you can take the battery pack and you can actually power 240 volt appliance with it. So you can run your table saw or whatever without having a temporary electrical service.
Dairyland is converting its forklifts to electric. We've got electric, at least one electric forklift in our warehouses
Yeah,
now.
the two in the La Crosse warehouse are
two.
electric, and there's one additional at one of the plants. I can't remember which plant it's at, but yeah. The advantage there too is no soot in the warehouse. If you've ever bought
Yeah.
something at a big box store and it seemed like it was dusty, it's probably soot from the forklift.
Yeah. And electric forklifts have really been around for quite a while. I mean, they're pretty commonly used, so.
They haven't. They're still on lead acid batteries because you actually have the space to do a lead acid battery, and the weight is an advantage because you have a heavy weight battery that actually increases the stability of the forklift.
Hmm. Do we have other questions? If not, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, John. And
You're welcome. Good to see you again, Ron.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, John.
It was a pleasure.